we want this A site. Relics, he's gonna find one, but it's Kohler with 3.
The cannons all gonna come down to timing. Cutler's gonna come up with the clutch. 4 kills on the round.
It's now gonna push forward. It's perfect. Oh my goodness, it's
He's just holding it all the way through. Sabro's already tickle peeks.
Spike defused.
Hello and welcome to Press Forward to Defuse, your weekly source of Valorant esports news and discussion. We've got a fun episode for you this week, a lot to talk about. I am Darth Mike, joined as usual by Sam, and we've got a special guest this week. It's Strong, who's going to be here to break down the action from this past week and what we've got upcoming. Strong, how you feeling today?
Can't complain.
And Sam, how you doing down in?
That was so succinct. Yeah, I'm pumped. Unfortunately, we did miss an episode. I believe you're gonna explain that in a second. But we got that means we have 2 weeks of stuff to talk about. Plus, we still have to talk about what's coming up. And I mean, hate to break it to you, love to break it to you. What's coming up is super massive. So I'm so hyped.
Yeah, before we get into the action, there's a lot to break down, obviously, but we just want to take a quick moment to talk about why we wound up canceling last week's show. We did decide to cancel it just because it was so soon to the Sinatra situation coming to light. It was a developing situation. Riot was still issuing their statements. We still had clarity coming in from Sentinels and all that. And so we didn't feel that we could address it on the show, and we didn't want to have the show without being able to address it in any way, shape, or form. It would feel like a massive omission on our part. So we just elected to give it a little bit of time, cancel the show, and talk about it this week. We're not going to be able to comment on specifics since this is developing situation, developing investigation from Riot's perspective. So we can't really get into the details of the case just because of our situation. But just as a straight statement, abuse has no place in our scene or in our society. The kind of things that detailed there have no place in any circumstance, and we will hopefully see more action taken. But that's all we're going to say about it. We are going to get into this week's news as it pertains to Valorant proper. And first, we're going to talk about a lot of announcements that came out over the last week or two. We have a lot of things coming through. First one up here, we've got David P to Excel. This was more of last week's news, but we'll touch on it quickly before we move on here and run it back. How do we feel about this? The XL team coming through. We got the rumors of the rest of the roster as well. What do we think about it, Sam?
My first thought was just how really weird the announcement video was. Did y'all watch that? There was like implied boosting or something. I don't know. It was really, really, really strange. David P is an interesting pickup for me purely because he has skill. I won't take that away from him. But there is a little bit of animosity amongst some people in the scene. Just because of like, there's always banter on Twitter, right? But some people seem to believe that David P takes it a little bit too far. And there's always that kind of toss up for an organization. Like, do you risk, all right, there's a bit of animosity there, but he's a good player. So how do you balance that out? Clearly for XL, they're fine with it. And what I'm really interested to see is how the rest of the roster is going to flesh out. Because obviously that's going to make a big impact in how this team's going to do. Right now we have one player. Doesn't say much.
Yeah, I think there is a rumor about the rest of this roster. Joe, you know a little bit more about this. How are you feeling about this squad?
I'm in the EU. I should clarify for anybody who doesn't know me. I'm a coach of an unsigned team in the EU scene, so I hear all the rumors, as it were. So I'm not quite sure what's public and what's not. I do happen to know.
I'll list the rumored players so that
Sure.
you don't have to say it. Hold on, let me find them.
Wikipedia?
All right, here we go. XL. They are rumored to be picking up Ozzy, Sunset Biggie, and DPS to go along with David P. That's the rumor as listed on Wikipedia. Is that give us a hint here based on what you know? Accurate? Not accurate?
I know at least 2 of those players are accurate, I believe. I know Biggie is 100% accurate. I think that's basically been confirmed at this point, to be honest. I don't know. I mean, looking at that list of players, it's XL are not shying away from controversy because DPS has been something of a polarizing figure in that regard. I mean, the thing about Biggie is obviously I think Biggie's the only person to get banned from all Valve majors in 2 capacities, because he was banned in 2015 for match fixing as a player, and he was banned this year for the abuse of the coach bug. So they're not shying away from controversy.
Oh my god.
Yeah, in terms of the
Maybe they're leaning into it. Maybe that's like the theme of the team.
maybe they'll be trying to be mini G2. Who knows? I mean, but yeah, I mean, in terms of talent on that roster, in terms of the talent room, there's some good players that are being rumored. I mean, if they got Ozzy, I think that would be a really good pickup because he's a very underrated player. I have heard some rumors with regards to David P wants to be the IGL of this team. I believe he was an IGL in CS, if I'm remembering correctly as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And he was supposed, like, there was a weird thing on G2 where he didn't have an IGL, and David P was put forward as the IGL, and then it didn't happen in the end, and it happened or it didn't work, something like this. So I don't know if I buy into David P as an IGL, because when he was at his best in Valorant, he was playing as a lurker, right? It was when he was able.
Mhm.
It was at that point, like July, August, where he was just playing Sage, and he just made these incredibly. I don't want to call them stupid because they worked, but they were stupid. He's pushing. He'd push Haven middle, he'd push Ascent mid, and it's like he got away with it because nobody had realised that he was doing this, and just everybody else left that room empty. That sort of thing, right? He was his best at his lurker, and you can't really be a lurker IGL. It's not. It's a bit of a weird thing, right? Because just the demands that you've been placed upon you with regards to lurker, because obviously, essentially, it comes down to you're trying to sense where the spots you can get into, right? And while in theory you think, okay, that works quite well for an IGL, in practice you're having to split your attention too much. So I don't know if David P works as an IGL in the capacity that he does best. Obviously, he switched on to Breach. He was trying to play a more supportive role towards the end of G2, so maybe. But I'm not convinced about him as an IGL. And this roster doesn't seem like. I mean, this could easily be like a roster that lands outside the top 20. But there are there, but I'm not convinced on guys like Biggie. I'm not convinced on David P. I don't know. It could go bad.
All right. Well, we're gonna move on from this because we've got a lot to cover. But that's the estimation here of what we're getting from the XL roster. We're just gonna blow through a few of these announcements since at this point they're kind of old news. Vladimir's dropped from Entropic. Do we have any big strong takes on that real quick? Big hot takes, or I want like a sentence and then we're gonna go on. Anyway,
Decent support player, but particularly special. I'm interested to see what they get from him.
Yeah.
Sam, hot take?
Well,
Same idea?
Not even a hot take. Just needed to make some changes. I guess this is the changes they're going with. We'll see how it pans out.
All right, moving on from that. Trippy's been announced to FaZe. I'm not even going to really bother spending time on this because we're going to talk about FaZe a whole lot later on. This is, again, old news at this point. XMS to Alliance. That one was kind of fun purely because they baited so hard on Twitter, implying that it was NBK, having people guess that it was Kenny S, and then it turns out to be XMS, which I'm just going to say, first of all, XMS is a fine player. He's a good player even. But if you're trying to bait people to think it's someone else, and then you're just naturally setting them up to be let down when you reveal who you actually signed, it's just kind of a dick move to do to your player.
Yeah.
Right? Like, look, I like Banks and Mitch, but come on. It's a dick move to XMS. Like, you're just naturally setting them up to be a bit of a letdown.
Yeah,
I mean, it created the hype, which was the idea. I mean, everyone was talking about it. The CS community, the Valorant community, it got a ton of, like, impressions and stuff. But like you said, being that player, and then everyone goes, oh, who? That's the worst part, because XMS is just not, let's face it, he does not have the same level of fame, if you can call it that. So a lot of people would have looked at that and just gone, who? And that's just like a really ouch feeling after hyping it up so much.
Yeah. I mean, XMS isn't a bad player by any means, but yeah, it didn't measure up to the hype. And I mean, to be honest, I think this roster is probably weaker for that move. Like, XMS is a decent player, but Krebon was extremely underrated. Like, I think Krebon's probably a top 15 player in Europe. And
yeah, that really took me by surprise, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably some reason for it or whatever, but yeah, it was an odd move, and it's hard to say where they go from here. But XMS isn't a bad player by any means. I'm not sure exactly when he started playing. I don't think he was in many of the early tournaments, but he has been playing with finals for a couple of months now. He's not one of the guys who just made the transition on the basis of him being a CS guy, right? He has made the base, like he's on the teams he's on the teams he is on the basis of his merit. He's not a bad player by any means, but I don't know about the upside. We'll see, I suppose.
All right, we're going to blow through a few more of these. Cider leaves Wave. We have any hot takes on that one real quick?
who the hell knows what's going on with that organization right now?
All right, that's our take. On we go. Just listing these off. Raise Your Edge had to leave their org. They became Ascend due to gambling things. Couldn't have the association with the gambling organization if they're in Riot-sponsored tournaments. So we now have Ascend. Their roster or their organization announcement looked like a PowerPoint slide. So, you know, they threw it together pretty hastily. I don't know that there's really much to talk about there. It's just kind of an interesting thing to note. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw us into the next. Now we're getting into some interesting announcements because there's a big tournament coming up. The Game Changers tournament is happening, and that's led to a huge shakeup in the female scene here in North America. We got a lot of teams picking people up. We got a roster change to Cloud9 White, which has been the most established team so far. They're picking up Katie. She's been playing with them since January, so this is perhaps the most expected move ever. But Katie is now actually signed to Cloud9 White. Makes a lot of sense. She clicks heads good. I don't know. Sam, give me your take on this.
The thing that I'm most interested in about, so obviously this was because Jazzy is only 15, and so she can't compete in Masters. So Katie is like the 6th woman, but also the playing in place of Jazzy, who is unable to play. So the only real question I have is what happens when Jazzy turns 16? I'm not sure when that happens, like how far off into the future, has it already happened? But it is the only real question mark I have hanging on this, because Jazzy was nutty. I remember her from the FTW tournament, and she's somebody whose praises I have sung from the heavens for like the last 6 months. She's really, really, really good. So yeah, biggest question mark for me. But I mean, if you take that out of the, like, if you just look at it in an isolated system of like Katie on C9 White, I mean, yeah, she's insane. She's also performed exceptionally well, so this makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good problem to have, I suppose, right? Like, I mean, it's classic C9 stuff where they just seem to have like they have their team and they have like 4 players under the radar who are all going to become gods at some point. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think that they'll probably. They're aware of it, but they'll probably they'll do good by everyone involved, I think, in the end. Yeah. But it's a good problem to have at the end of the day.
Yeah, it is. I'm a huge fan of Katie. I've been a fan of Katie from her days competing in Counter-Strike. I've been following her career for a while. I think she's got enormous talent, enormous potential there. So I'd imagine that if Jazzy becomes able to compete, you're going to wind up with a version of the roster that has both of them on it, because why would you pass up that kind of firepower? And that's just going to make them a more dangerous team in the long run. So I'm really excited to see how they're going to be able to do in Game Changers and how they're going to be able to do in this next Masters cycle as well. Speaking of Game Changers teams, we have so many announcements to get through. The first one of them just happened, literally like just now, a few minutes ago. So we're going to be talking about that in a second. But I guess you know what? No, I'm going to talk about TSM first. They just announced it. It's exciting. It's hot off the presses. Let's talk about TSM. Literally at the top of the hour, as we were going live, they announced their team. They now have a female team competing in Valorant. Their team is Kath, Axna, Lunar Cats, Zosie, and MLE Cutie. Not really sure. That's the bottom two, Zosie and MLE, I am not nearly as familiar with or at all familiar with. The top 3 I know from their time in CS. Kath competed on various top CS teams in the female scene. Athena as well. And then Kathy, Lunar Cats, has been competing at various points, mostly more of the streaming market, but she's been popping off in Valorant of late. So this is super cool. This is super exciting. This is a big org picking up a team. How do we feel about this one? Sam, take it.
It's about freaking time, and it's kind of sad that it took a female-only tournament to make this happen. Of course, C9 White were kind of the pioneers in this regard, but thank the Lord, it's finally happened. We need to get a spotlight on these female gamers because they're insane. They're absolutely nutty. A lot of them are. And, you know, we kind of spoke about this when Game Changers was announced. You know, we're creating safe spaces for women to explore gaming and to potentially get seen, get scouted out. Maybe we see more mixed teams like Evil Geniuses. That's kind of like the direction that we want to be moving into. So it's really exciting to see that orgs are starting to pick up these ladies, starting to nurture and foster that growth and development. And now we don't have just the tournament creating those safe spaces. We have organizations as well. Because, you know, when you have an org, they've got your back. So there's like safe spaces on safe spaces. We're finally moving to a point where women can start to feel included in esports. And honestly, that's what I'm here for.
Strong?
Yeah, it's great news. And It is a shame that, and I would have expected better out of a lot of these organisations with regards to picking up teams quicker. But if we're here now, it's what matters, right?
It is good to see. I know that, I mean, honestly, expecting you guys to know these 5 names, a little bit of a jump. The reason I know them is from their time competing in Counter-Strike. I will see more of what they could do in Valorant. I don't know if, I think Kath was competing at the very least, but I'm not sure about the other ones. I know Lunar Cats has been streaming a lot of Valorant, but I am curious to see how this is going to work as a 5-woman squad, how they're going to be able to do. But we've got more of them to talk about. That's the first big announcement. Next, we're going to move on to CLG, who have now announced that they're building a Valorant roster as well, starting with Benita, who competed with their CS team for a long time, and they've also announced their first pickup beyond Benita, picking up Naomi as well. So they've now got 2 players in their roster as established and announced. Presumably the other 3 are signed, and they're just going to do that thing where you announce your players one at a time to build as much social media engagement as possible. And I hate that so much. I hate it so much. But 2 good names already from the CS background. Again, not quite sure how they're going to lock in Valorant, but they have been playing CS for a long time, competing for a long time. So I'm excited to see this squad take shape. Any thoughts on it from either of you two? I would be surprised if you know these names, since you both don't come from a CS background.
Well, Benita, I do actually remember having played with CLG Red in the FTW tournament. And I'm fairly certain I saw Naomi playing as well, because the name is definitely familiar to me. So, I've seen a little bit from these ladies. And again, I mean, CLG did really well in that tournament. Like you said, they come from the CSGO background. So obviously they have that behind them to kind of propel them forward a little bit. It's just getting used to the abilities. But they've been playing the game for quite some time now. FTW was September. And obviously they'd been playing before that. So, they've had this time to start practicing. Now they're going to jump into it at a competitive level beyond the kind of one-off female tournament that there was. Now it becomes a league. Now it becomes, a big opportunity for them. And I'm glad to see that the moves are happening. I'm glad to see more women coming into the scene.
Yeah. We got one more team to talk about. Moon Raccoons. Moon Raccoons announced Moon Raccoons Black. So there's another Moon Raccoons team, which is great because I own a Moon Raccoon shirt, and I was really sad that it almost immediately became irrelevant by the time I got it. So breaking out the Moon Raccoon shirt again, I've got merch that's relevant, and I'll be honest, I don't know any of these players at all, but I am excited to get to know them through competition. I mean, that's the reality, is there haven't been that many opportunities to display your Valorant skill apart from that one FTW tournament. It's really been pretty barren unless you can make your way through the open qualifiers. So now we're going to see a little bit more of the talent that's out there. We're going to get a better idea for it. And there's going to be a lot of recognized names and game changers, it seems, which is exciting for me, at least.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. I see someone said something about Rise has announced a team. Did they? Trying to figure that out right now. Do we have
there was another
announcement?
question there. So female teams aren't segregated. Female teams are able to compete in the normal VCT. Like you look at Evil Geniuses, for example, they have a mixed team. C9 White has been competing in VCT. But the VCT Game Changers is a female and marginalized genders only tournament. It's to create a safe space for them, to allow them to enter into the scene so that they can build up the confidence to hopefully join the rest of their male counterparts in VCT. And of course, the C9 White ladies who have been blazing the trail for them.
All right, so I think we're going to hot on. Do we have anything else to talk about? We do. We actually have a lot to talk about.
Rise is a player. CLG Red just announced Rise will be joining them. So I guess that's a player.
That makes way more sense. I was very confused by that. That's the problem with having players name the same thing as teams. It gets confusing. Moving on in our announcements, we're going to talk about Cloud9 making some changes, dropping Vice. They're moving away from the 6-player roster. They're moving to a 5-player squad voted in. Vice is out. Vice was calling for this team, so he's now gone. Apparently, Mitch is now going to be calling for the squad and likely playing Sentinels for them as well, so they're shifting up roles. They're moving stuff around here. How do we feel about the health of this team? Strong, why don't you start us here?
Yeah, I mean, C9 were always one of those teams where it was kind of clear they were going to have to make... They were built for the first 3 months of this game, right? You brought in a bunch of guys with extremely experienced in CS. You had 1 or 2 guys where, obviously 10s, where the potential was ridiculous. They now have mini 10s in the form of Poise, obviously. But the reality is they're always going to have to make a full rebuild and probably just get rid of everybody at some point. So they're in the process of rebuilding now. I wouldn't expect much from them short term because I think they're in that stage where they're just trying to amass talent, I think. So Vice, obviously, they've just looked at it and said, okay, not part of the long-term plan. And that's fine. That's kind of what happens in these things. But what I'll say is I don't think this is going to be the final form, right? There's going to be a lot more tumult in this roster to come.
Sam?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen a good look from C9 Blue in a while. We've seen them almost get somewhere, but it's never been quite enough. And then, of course, with Tens dropping to a content creator position, and it was you that had the hot take that said this is the best thing that's happened to them because now they're going to get, I don't know, more talent or something. I can't remember what the hell you said. It was like some crazy thing. That didn't pan out.
No,
who would have guessed? But they're making more changes, so hopefully, you know what it's like at the end of summer and you have to burn all the grass so that when the next cycle comes around, the grass can grow again. That's kind of where they're at. Like, they had a good run. Things, they hit winter. Things were not going too great. Now you gotta burn it all to the ground. Go again. Hopefully, and as Strong says, not short term. I don't expect to see them in, like, the next cycle, the next challenges, suddenly blasting away all the competition. But hopefully with a little bit of time, a little bit of training, a little bit of input and whatnot, what have you, team things, they can bring it back around.
I'm going to take a counter stance to the two of you. I actually think that this next Master Cycle is where I expect to see them start to show up because they were looking like they were starting to get a little bit dangerous in the last, right? They were pushing some teams. They were starting to look like a unit, but they were still figuring out that 6-player roster. They were swapping players in. Zeta was coming in. Zeta was going out. Poise was coming in. Poise was going out. They never really looked like they had their full 5 in. By removing Vice, they removed that question. They're going to have more dedicated roles. They're going to be able to work on that, and they've got some time to do it. The biggest question mark for me is Mitch taking over the calling. It's going to be a challenge for him, and he was previously one of their better players, one of their more reliable players as well. So that adds a dimension of challenge. But I actually expect them to be a little bit more competitive next cycle than they have been, purely because they seem to be getting some answers for what they actually want to do. But we'll have to see. I'm going to blast through these next few announcements because we are, as per usual, taking way too long to do anything. Fraud is officially signed to Beast Coast. He's been coaching that roster for a little while now, but they officially announced it. So he is signed up. He is fully brought on as their coach. That's cool. Glad to see him get another gig. I will always wonder what the heck happened with T1. And at some point, like 2 years from now, we're going to get the tell-all interview where we find out like he was actually somebody's brother and somebody else got stabbed. And it's soap opera. That's what I'm expecting at this point. I want soap opera action from that. Blasting through these next announcements, Tens to Sends. We're going to talk about that more when we get into Masters because holy cow, it's super cool that has worked out for them. They have very fortunate in the timing on that. Equinox. Okay. To summarize this situation, Equinox cut their very competitive Valorant team, said they wanted to remain competitive in Valorant and wanted to get better, and then posted a thing about having open tryouts in Oklahoma City where you pay $20 to try out for their Valorant squad. Sam? Thoughts?
Right. $20 to try out at a LAN center. 12 years and older, so you got a bunch of 12-year-olds sharing computers in the middle of a pandemic, all paying $20 for this tryout. And then, like, they say you get a portion of your prize winnings. They don't specify the percentage. Like, I know some orgs will take a little bit, like a 90-10 or an 80-20. I don't know the exacts, but like a little bit more specificity. I saw a lot of people moaning about how they said you get like a social media crash course and everyone's like, oh, this is so stupid. No, I actually think that's really smart. The number of players that need to learn that if you say dumb shit on social media, it will come around and bite you in the ass is just massive. So I'm actually on board with that one. But this whole like $20 shenanigan, and it's like a local thing. So like only people that live in Oklahoma are allowed to do this. What were they thinking? Anyway.
Maybe there's an untapped Oklahoma Valorant talent pool that we're all just not seeing. Joe, what do you think about it?
I mean, this is a classic way of... I mean, to be fair, they're far from the first org that have done this. This is a classic way where a lot of these orgs essentially have become geolocated because they have like a team house that they've built into something else. have done this. I mean, you don't really see it in North America so much, but I know, for example, one of the teams I used to work for in Brazil, CMB, they were very big on this. They did like summer schools and stuff like that for like bringing in these younger players, and they could be any rank realistically as long as they're paying you. I think I seem to recall another team, there's a couple teams in Turkey that do some stuff like that. It's not that uncommon as a business practice, but it is a business practice, and to even pretend that this is about building a competitive roster, no, come on. It's not, though, is it? It's just not.
The thing that just rankled me, like, again, I wouldn't really care about this announcement. Look, you want to pivot to being a regional team, whatever. That's what you've decided your pivot. They're a startup organization. They're trying to figure out what they're doing, yada, yada, yada. But the problem was that they had given an interview, their head of esports had given an interview like the week before, or 2 weeks before or whatever, where he said, we want to be more competitive at the top. Like, that's why we've made the decision to cut our roster. That's why we've made the decision to make changes. This is not a move to be more competitive at the top. It's just not what it is. Call it what it is. Be honest about what you're doing.
Did he say they want to be at the top short term? I mean, maybe he meant in the next 6 to 7 years.
Yeah, we've got a decade game plan here. We're going to be developing these kids from 12. By the time they hit 20, we are going to be the best. So that's a very long-term vision for esports. Man, if you can get investors to agree on an 8-year timeline, then I could sell you the moon. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the Masters. We're halfway through the Master cycle for EU and NA. It's super exciting. Crazy stuff is going on. We've got Joe with us who knows a lot about what's going on in EU. So we're going to start there. We're going to talk about it. Yeah, Sam, you want to start some of this?
Yeah, so this has actually been interesting. The teams that made it were surprising in and of itself. Of course, no G2, no Fnatic. That was amazing. Then we had this kind of Polish team, Ballista, that blew out of nowhere. No one knew where these guys came from, and they just dominated the competition. Of course, we had Defuse as well, and then Ascend, formerly Raise Your Edge. And of course, the most notable player on that team, in my opinion anyway, is Smeag, who was doing some phenomenal stuff back in the Ignition series. So teams with some good players, some of them kind of dark horses in the scene, and did really well given that they were dark horses. If we take a look at some of the results, we had Heretics that took down Ballista, but they were close games. 13-10, 14-12 against Heretics, the winners of First Strike. Really, really good. Ascend got taken down by Nip, and they were a team that showed a lot of promise, obviously making it this far into Masters, but Nip's form has just been so good recently. Like, I was blown away in that last challenges that they performed in because I didn't expect them to do that well. Guild also managed to push FPX on one map at a 13-10, but the last two maps were complete stomps. FPX taking full control of those last two maps. Alliance went down 2-0 to this French team. But again, Alliance and Defuse, both kind of dark horse teams, kind of wild cards. Nobody really knew what to expect there coming into Masters. The fact that they both made it to Masters was somewhat surprising in and of itself. So it was kind of like a bashing of two unknowns, and one of them came out on top. Yeah, just some really, really interesting results all around. Now,
Joe, you're our man who's got a little bit of a window behind the curtain due to your coaching efforts, your behind-the-scenes spot. So I want you to tell me, was there any major surprise here? Do you think anyone majorly outperformed your expectations, majorly underperformed your expectations? How are you feeling about the big picture, I guess?
I mean, to be honest, to an extent, I think the matchups themselves kind of went how most people would have really expected them to go. I mean, the big surprise of the entire tournament obviously has been Ballista. And I can speak firsthand to this because we got run over by Ballista in the qualifiers. And I legit think most people were expecting us to actually win that series. It wasn't even like, oh yeah, we won. No, we were supposed to win that series. And we didn't, but that's another discussion. The thing with Ballista is, and it's interesting because Ballista are not even like the best Polish team. Like, in terms of how they do in local competition, they're like the third or fourth best team. But they got on a run here. And they got on a run that they banged through us, banged through Fnatic, and played Heretics close. And then obviously just completely got stomped by Ascend. I think it was like 13-0. It was 13-0. It's like 13-3, 13-1. I mean, the key with Ballista is they're quite a smart team. They seem to have a very good coaching structure. They seem to be very good at counter-stratting, all these sorts of things. They're a very aggressive team. But the thing that really made them stand out was it was two players on the team. I think Bold it was, the Sky player, and Baddy G, I believe, the Phoenix player. Mm-hmm. And these were two guys, obviously. Sky is more common now in the EU scene. Phoenix is not. EU does not play Phoenix outside of Polish teams for some reason. And there was a lot they managed to do with regards to particularly how they took space on an individual level, just because a mastery of those agents, to an extent, I'd almost say. I mean, Bold plays very weirdly. Bold is the only guy I've ever seen who plays Sky as a lurker. He'll just go up, like on Bind, he'll just go up into bathrooms and he'll just flash for info, and he'll just get into T-spawn and he'll just start shift walking around the map waiting to kill somebody. It's the only Sky I've ever done. Like you see, I don't know, Soulcast player. Soulcast, yeah, get in there, one right there, scream if you will, go right in, and then Bold's just like, just wandering along. Oh, I got two. The classic sort of lurks. Yeah, but Blister and our team, and to be honest, they're very good at counter-strutting stuff, but I think there's some things that we leave more to be decided in terms of how they play defaults and stuff like that. So it kind of didn't shock me that they ended up getting destroyed by Ascend. I kind of thought that they would get, I don't want to say found out, because there are things about them that are fundamentally good, but I think teams didn't really play against them correctly for this one. And we'll see what happens from them. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they actually do think. But yeah, Bliss obviously the big surprise of the entire event. Ascend have quietly been just a very good team for a while. CNED obviously. CNED was super underrated for a long time, I think, because I mean, raise your edge, Ascend, whatever. They got a hell of a deal on CNED, I think, because essentially CNED's stock was just going down and down and down, I think, in terms of how people perceived him, because people were like, okay, he's an AWP one trick, which not quite true, but he is obviously he is one of the players who is still most reliant on the AWP. AWP got nerfed, Jet got nerfed. It's obviously CNED bad now, right? Well, at First Strike, he wasn't awful by any means. He was that team's second best player still, and I feel like the AWP has had something of a renaissance, really, in terms of how teams play, how people play, because people have realised, okay, no, it's not just you can still set stuff up with the AWP, right? It's not, you don't just have to dash in somewhere, you don't have to just run in somewhere, try and get the first shot, dash out. It's not just you can use the AWP for things other than getting 5v4s, and people are getting a lot more sophisticated with how they play with the AWP, and I think also to an extent there was a period in October, November, December where almost nobody was using the AWP, so people kind of forgot how to play against it. Same as they forgot how to play against it at first. Forgot how to play against Sage at First Strike, and I think his stock's been going up significantly since. I mean, it didn't shock me to see sort of him run over in that guy, but yeah, I mean, Defuse has been around for a long time, but a long, long time. People forget how long Defuse has been around. They've been around like 8 months now, with at least 4 members of this lineup. I mean, the big shock was that they beat G2 because nobody thought, like, everyone was like, okay, Defuse, good team, Logan, absolute beast, but surely not going to beat G2. But the Stars matched up well, they did quite well. I don't think anything I've seen from Blister, Ascend, Defuse has fundamentally changed the way I look upon these teams. I mean, maybe Blister, because I think nobody was really thinking Blister could hang with like the top tier, and I think Blister showed with Heretics they can at least hang with the top tier. But the thing is that the tier 2 pool in Europe right now is massive. There's about 10, 15 teams who can beat each other on the other day, and then you've got like basically FPX, NIP, maybe Heretics above the entire lot, but then everyone else can beat everyone else. And I think that's kind of what the depth is what he speaks to. That's why you saw teams like Vitality, like G2, like Honk. But like you saw
Honk.
Gotta do it.
The big names, the big org names, Vitality,
yeah,
G2,
Honk.
yeah, all the big names. No, but that is what I think that is what you've seen. You've seen there is a lot of depth in Europe, and obviously there's some concerns right now with regards to going to Masters, because the teams haven't distinguished themselves from the pack. A few teams have distinguished themselves from that chasing pack of like 15 teams.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's only right now it's only really been FPX, you could even say, to some extent. But I think it just more goes to show how strong that tier 2 in Europe is. And it's a shame we don't have more tournaments. We don't get to see this more often than just in right events, because it would.
Shame we have such a bad format.
Yeah, that too.
I mean, at least there's finally a format where you actually have more than one chance when you're in groups here in Masters. But yeah, we harp on it a lot on the podcast, where we just want more tournaments purely so you have more data points to talk about these teams.
Honestly.
Because you're right, that pool of 15 teams, how do you separate them when they just don't play each other that often in officials? It's difficult. And then even, when you have those massive bracket formats, okay, well, one team A beat team B, but then team C beat team A in a different context. What's the relation between team C and team B? We have no idea. We have no idea of that form. There's just not enough data points. But we're starting to get a little bit more of a picture. I do want to talk about Sam's favorite team, Guild. They've made it through. They still survive. They're still in this. Sam, how you feeling about them going forward? They're in the lower
Oh.
bracket of Group B. Are they going to make it?
I'll be honest, like the last couple of weeks I've been looking at Guild and FaZe, and you know from like weeks of this show, those are the two teams that I've always been like, come on guys, I believe you can do it. Finally, both teams starting to make something happen. Guild not quite at the same level as what FaZe has been doing, which we'll get into in a bit, but I'm impressed. I think that they're finally starting to make something happen, and I'll be honest, I don't know what changed. I don't know what flicked the switch. I don't think that they've had a roster change recently, apart from Safe, which is not recent. But I'm happy. I'm impressed. I can't wait to see if they can actually, because they're still in. They're not in the loser match. I think they're
No, they
trying to
are.
No,
remember.
they're in the loser match.
They're in the decider match. So they're going to be playing up against the loser of FPX or Defuse. So probably Defuse, which I'm not sure if they win that. Actually, to be honest, I'm not sure if they win their next match either way. Regardless of who they play against, I'm not sure they make it. I don't know if Strong agrees.
I think they make it over Defuse, to be honest. I mean, they've gotten a lot. I mean, this is kind of the thing. They're a team that is always either wildly overrated or wildly underrated. And I feel like for much of this year, they've kind of been underrated because, I mean, the funny thing is, they were one of the few teams who did play a lot of tournaments in that like third or fourth quarter of last year, right? They played quite a few tournaments, and that meant that they put up quite a lot of ugly losses in those tournaments. People looked back and they looked at the sort of team they lost to. Like lost to Gambit, I think they lost to HSD. They lost to All the Rage, which was the 5-stack of Lithuanians that nobody knew at the time and just came out of nowhere and was probably a top 10 team towards the end of the year, but nobody remembers that now. And people looked at them like, oh, they're taking bad losses, but they must be really bad. But to be fair with how they've played and how we've played when we've got the chance to see them on stream since the new year, I think they've been a much better team. There are issues with them still, but yeah, I have to think they beat Defuse because, again, Defuse played very well against G2. Defuse played very well against Alliance. I don't think Defuse is suddenly a top tier team in that regard, though. I don't think they're a tier 1 team, even if Logan is amazing. And I tend to think that Guild are on the up right now, and they probably will beat Defuse if it comes down to that. So,
all right, there we go. Think Guild gonna make it? We'll see. We're gonna hop across the pond. We're gonna talk about NA and what's happened to the Masters here. And the first thing I want to talk about, I know people have been putting it up in the chat. The Smeag. A way of life, a new way of life. FaZe rocking through the upper bracket, looking phenomenal. Unexpected for this guy at the very least. I mean, they've looked incredible, and it's all down to the Smeag. Their playstyle's working out. They're catching teams off guard. They're continuing, and it's not like it's surprising anymore, right? Everybody knows kind of what to expect with FaZe, so it's no longer just, oh, they're playing counter to expectations. No, they're making this work as a consistent playstyle, and they're continuing to beat top teams. I'm feeling good about the Smeag. I know we've got the #1 FaZe cheerleader here, so let's talk about it, Sam.
So here's the thing, like, you know, we want to attribute it to the Smeag, but let's face it, BabyBay's been there for a while and they weren't getting results. I attribute this more to someone coming in and giving them some direction. Because we've always known them as a super explosive, aggressive, really in-your-face team, but uncontrolled. They would do like the most ridiculous things. They'd get caught unawares. They'd get shut down. And it was like, well, what the hell were you thinking doing that? Now, they've got that same aggressive, explosive, in-your-face kind of play style. But there's actually, like, it feels like there's a plan behind it. The way I really enjoyed when I was watching the challenges, how they were able to shut down a map. Their offense was good, but their defense, no one could get through their defense. They took such good control of the map. And yes, they still played aggressively, but they held down the map well. And somebody made the joke, I think it was on Valoranting yesterday about, I think it was Infamous. Infamous made the joke, something about CS players can't play on icebox because you don't look up. This is Overwatch's territory. I think that's a pretty valid comment. And icebox is one of the maps in particular that they seem to have such good control over. This is the biggest difference for me. They've always had the firepower. They've always had the potential, but they needed someone to rein it in and to direct it. Now that it's been given a direction, they're absolutely insane.
Joe?
I have a lot of thoughts on this.
I want to hear them. I know you got some thoughts.
Yeah.
Lay it on us. Spicier the better.
Yeah. So I mean, this is the thing. First of all, if we're talking FaZe stocks right now, I feel like I'd be a seller, right? In terms of, I think we've seen the best we're going to see out of them to an extent, to be honest. And I feel like this is the thing. I feel like they're a beneficiary of, well, one, yeah, they've got some structure now. So obviously, people, we mentioned this in the beginning. They brought on a coach, Trippy. They brought him on about a month ago. They've been super unclear on when they brought him in, right? Because they always are. This isn't the first time they've had a head coach, because they've head coach previously for about 2 months in, and it was at a weird time because it was like just after the last Ignition event. They sort of brought him in properly, and then they got rid of him just before the I think it was after Nerd Street Gamers Renegades event, before First Strike qualifiers. They had a coach, Salah. He was signed. He was fully contracted. He was I don't know how he feels about Salah. but he was signed. He was fully contracted. I mean, I'm pretty sure I can find the announcement photo out here somewhere. He was going to be announced, and then sort of, it's a player-run team. I won't go far into it, but then they sort of went away with him. But if you were around the NA scene at that time, you will remember there were people saying all over the place, well, what are FaZe doing? FaZe look a lot better now. FaZe look more structured. So really, they just needed, like, and it was weird to me that then they got rid of him, and they so long picking up another coach, because all FaZe needed was a bit of structure, and they've got that bit of structure now, and they're doing really good. The reason I say I've said on stocks is because I also think they are benefiting from, this seems like a really weird period right now in terms of how the scene is developing in NA, because you have a lot of teams that are making roster swaps or in some cases are figuring out, because I mean, there's this old meme, right, in terms of, NA just plays Pucky, right? And that's repeated across every single esport. And the reason that get repeated is because, well, one, it's true, but the reason that it's true is because it actually comes down to an infrastructure, sort of structural level of things. NA is a region that does not like auxiliary staff, does not like coaches. Like, fundamentally does not like coaches. It has to, like, it's a case of, the answers have to come from players, have to come within the teams, and that means that you always have this evolution of where they do very well early on in the game's lifespan, because essentially that sort of way of thinking allows you to develop extremely well in terms of, you find the individual, you find the individual outplays, right? You find how to get the 1v1, and you find how to exploit the 1v1. As soon as it essentially becomes, okay, well, teams know how to deal with the 1v1, then it starts becoming like, they tend to start falling behind. And that's like an ironclad truth of NA versus the UX esports. NA starts out well early, but falls behind because they don't develop, and as a group collective, they don't tend to think about these games in the same way. And I think a lot of teams in NA right now are realizing, oh crap, like they've kind of started realizing in the last month or two, okay, we actually do need auxiliary staff, we actually do need a proper structure. And you haven't seen a lot of teams making roster structs on that regard. You're seeing a lot of teams having to switch in and out. I mean, I think I looked at it, and it was surprising to me how few teams had coaches or analysts or anything like that when I was looking at First Strike. And that is changing now. Obviously, I think Sentinels are still like the one outlier, but there might be some behind the scenes, who knows. Envy, another outlier. I do know there's somebody working with Envy. But a couple of other teams have actually had to change coaching staff. Obviously, T1 are doing their whole odd thing where they've got the Korean-style head coach David Dennis in, and they try and look for a strategic coach. But a lot of teams are basically like a month or two into developing into the way that will actually allow them to succeed internationally. And that creates a hole for a team that just is mechanically good, but can thrive off a small amount of structure just being introduced into their game. So I think FaZe rambling a little bit, but the point here is FaZe are hitting at the perfect time. So FaZe have got hot at the perfect time to just run through some of these teams that are having to take a step back to take 2 steps forward. So that's kind of my view on it.
It's an interesting view. I think I don't think you're wrong at all. I mean, I think that they've hit a hot streak, and that teams are struggling to adapt to them. And you're right, the lack of support structure, the lack of coaches, analysts, that kind of thing, it reduces your ability to adapt to a play style. Because if you're just leaving it to the players to pick up the slack, I don't care how brilliant your IGL is. You still got to focus on personal form, still got to focus on getting the team in form. Can't really be, okay, this playstyle is radically different to what I'm expecting. I've got to completely shift the way we're calling. That's a huge ask for one person. So I do think that as we see more coaches come in, hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, keep picking up coaches, NA teams, we should see more of that come to fruition. And look, FaZe is the ultimate poster boy now for pick up a dang coach, you fools, because they went from being a team where we're like, yeah, I mean, they're probably going to be competing for like top 8, but nowhere beyond that, to being like, oh my God, they're destroying everyone. The victory over Envy to me was really eye-opening, because all their games so far, you're like, well, they played well. They dismantled Envy very effectively. I think there was a tweet from Trippy that I saw where he said, this was our test. The anti-CS playstyle we created is solid. The team is solid. We're ready. That was after they beat Envy. And I agree with him. Right? You've passed every test so far. The next one's going to be Sentinels here in the upper bracket. We're going to talk about the Sentinel story because that's a whole different storyline going on here. But FaZe Clan, they've stood up to it. It hasn't just been a flash in the pan where they've surprised some teams or maybe taken off some of the weaker members of the pack. They're beating teams like Envy that we really expected to be contenders for that grand final spot, and that we still expect to be contenders for that grand final spot. This is where we start to see that structure, and this is where we start to see what they're doing is working. And I do have to say, I enjoy the banter around it as well. I enjoy the Smeag. I enjoy that whole talk. I'm starting to come over to it. I was pretty out on FaZe for a long time, as Sam will attest, but starting to worm their way into a little place in my heart. Little place right here. We are gonna let's talk about some of the other teams though, because I'll just talk about. I mean, obviously this is the most fascinating aspect of NA right now. It's the biggest turn up. The other aspect, Tens and Sens. It's no longer Tens and Friends. Now it's Tens and Sens. He comes in last possible minute, coming in as a stand-in for this tournament. They figure out a deal with Cloud9. It seems like it's a loan type situation. He's like fully transferred over, but only temporarily, and they are doing great. Turns out he's still really dang good at Valorant. Sentinels look good with him in it. They're in the upper bracket final, right? Like it's obviously it's not perfect. They're letting him kind of do his thing a lot of the time because that's how you set it up when you got to stand in this late. But Tens is so good that is working. How are we feeling about this roster and their run through here, Sam?
So, first of all, you kind of mentioned the banter, and I love Sentinel's social media manager because 100 Thieves recently put out a line of streetwear or like shoes, sneakers, and Sentinels, after their win, retweet that with the run it back all the way down to the loser bracket. Just top tier banter. Yeah, I was somewhat surprised coming into this. We knew that Sentinels were going to need to pick up a different fifth after the announcement came out that Sinatra would be unable to play, pending investigation. They needed a new fifth. They don't have a 6-man roster. There were kind of rumors, and people were like, get Tens! People on social media, you know what they're like. But it happened. They got Tens. And I was skeptical, not about Tens' skill, but just about how well he'd be able to slot in with the rest of the team. Well, prove me wrong, I guess. I mean, he performed out of his freaking mind. And this is not unexpected. He also was very versatile, picked up the Reyna. I think he picked up the Jet as well at a point. Like, he was quite flexible in what he was playing because he needed to play around Sick. So they managed to play around each other quite well. And Sick has always been, like, I felt that he was really underrated about 3 to 4 months ago and beyond, and before that. Super underrated player. Now suddenly people are starting to talk about him. So Sick and Tens performing really, really well. The most interesting thing about the Tens thing is that in an interview that was done with Nerd Street Gamers, you guys can go find that on the website. But we interviewed Tens, and he said that it would be a consideration if Sentinels came forward and said, "Yo, we want to make this permanent." He would consider it, and I think that first of all, that says that the reason he left Cloud9 was less about not wanting to play the game anymore and more about not wanting to lose while playing the game
Not wanting to play the game for them. Yeah.
Like, I want to win games, and now it's happening. So I know that there's like a buyback clause, or I say I know, I think it was reported by Fion Fire, saying that so they had to buy tens in order for it to line up with Riot's policies regarding rosters for the Masters event. So they had to actually physically buy tens. But there's like a clause somewhere in there that says at the end of Masters, Sentinels have to sell him back to C9.
It's
And- but
basically a loan. It's a full transfer
Yeah.
of ownership on a temporary basis. It's a loan. It's
Yeah.
just you can't have competing. You can't have a financial interest from another organization over the term of your competition. It makes sense. It's a way to prevent conflicts of interest. But you know they kind of skirted it. They followed to the letter of the law, not necessarily the spirit, but understandable in that circumstance.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this does turn into something that will be a permanent move though, because he fits so perfectly into how Sentinels. I mean, it's his classic thing, right? You've got 4 players, then you bring in a 5th, you give him the freedom to do what he wants because you have that structure in that 4, and it works. I mean, this is going way back, but obviously Zipan's still one of the best players in Europe.
Oh yeah.
But this is what happened in back in Fabrican, which obviously then the core of which became FPX. They got rid of their 5th player. They brought in Zipan. They basically said, "Okay, Zipan, go kill," and it worked beautifully. And they went from being a solid contender team to like, okay, no, these guys are top 3 or top 4 in Europe, and that continued on to FPX. There's a lot to be said for having a structure where you can, and then just bringing a player in and going, okay, go crazy, and that's clearly working for Sentinels. And obviously, long term, you never know how it'll develop, but I feel like that's got to be a keeper for them. Like I'd be very surprised if he goes back to C9.
I think it makes complete sense. It's also a fantastic opportunity for Sentinels to take what is a very negative situation and a hugely negative PR situation, and you've got tens ready-made packaged to bring into the roster to kind of completely change the direction, completely change the narrative, wash the taste out of everyone's mouth of what's going on. I think they'd be fools to let the opportunity pass if there's any way to actually make that happen. Also, I just want to give a quick shout out to Shazam, because I think it's very impressive that he, as the IGL for the roster, not only adapted to bringing in a new 5th and changing up what he's going to have to call and changing up how they're going to have to play, but also maintained his personal form. His stats didn't really take a dip. He played perfectly well, played quite well, actually, which I'm just going to say, impressive. I gained some respect, absolutely, for Shazam for being able to cope with the circumstances and still maintain personal form as well. It's nice. It's impressive there. We are going to have to move on because we're running out of time. We're so out of time.
Again.
We're not even really going to talk about these other matches because I want to talk about the matches that are coming up. It's just got no time. Just got no time here. The perpetual problem. Talking about next week's games. Here. I'm going to keep us on NA since we're already on it. We got the lower bracket matchups. We got 100 Thieves coming up against Gen G. This is Recon Bolt where we look forward. 100 Thieves versus Gen G. Who you got? Give me one sentence as to why. We're going to blitz through these predictions here. Joe, why don't you start us here?
I mean, it's going to be 100 Thieves still because they've been out of form, but I can't see Gen G beating them.
That was as succinct as I could ask. Hit me with it, Sam.
Will you accept 100 Thieves because they're just better?
Because they're just better. Sure, absolutely. I'll take it. I'm gonna have faith in my Gen G boys. You guys, I am chief MCE fandom here. We're talking about coaches being added to rosters. We're talking about coaches helping the development of the team. I think that 100 Thieves, if you're looking at, classical odds, they should absolutely have the edge. That is perfectly reasonable stance to take, but I'm not reasonable. So I think that Gen G, they're going to have done their homework coming into this matchup. They're going to have had a lot of time to do their homework. I'm not saying that, obviously both sides have a lot of brain power behind them. I don't want to discount that. There's going to be a lot going on. I will say an interesting narrative for this matchup, an interesting storyline is MCE was Steel's coach not that long ago on Chaos over in Counter-Strike. They're very familiar, very friendly. Obviously, there's going to be a healthy rivalry there in terms of wanting to beat the other. Expect maybe some fun Twitter banter afterwards between the two. That's a thread to think about. All right, on to the next matchup. Envy versus Luminosity. Who you got? Sam, start us on this one, and why?
Despite Luminosity being on such a wild upswing, I still have so much faith in Luminosity. The main reason Luminosity are in the lower bracket right now is because they came up against tens and sens. I think given another team, maybe not FaZe, but another team in the bracket, they might still be in that winner bracket. I see them taking this next matchup.
Joe?
I think the talent and the structure on Envy is just good enough that I know Luminosity have been better lately, but I can't see him on the same level as Envy, to be honest. I think that's just going to be a 2-0 for Envy.
2-0 for Envy. That's a bold prediction there. I think we're going to get a 3-map series. I think it's going to be tight. It comes down to a knife's edge for me, but I think I'm going to lean Envy. I'm going to lean Envy as well. I think they progress through. I do think
Well,
they
you're the
manage to
Envy
edge them out.
fanboy, so you should be.
I'm also a Luminosity fanboy, though. I love all these guys. How can I pick? How can I pick? No, it comes down to what I actually think is going to happen because I love both teams, so I won't put it down to just bias there. But yeah, all right, let's move into the upper bracket. This is obviously the big marquee matchup. FaZe Clan, hot streak, tens and sens, sens and tens. I guess it's sens and tens at this point. That's the thing. The beautiful thing for tens is he no longer has to be tens and friends. They're all headline players at this point. Sentinels has a lot of star power behind it. They're coming up against a FaZe Clan that is smeaging their way through the upper bracket. How do we think the Colossus collision of two massive forces? Who's going to come out walking away from this one? Joe, hit us with it.
Sentinels 2-1. Like, I mean, this is you want me to put in a sentence. FaZe are boasting about how we are the ultimate anti-CS team with the ultimate anti-CS style. Okay, great. That's not going to work in Sentinels because Sentinels don't play like a CS team, even if they are CS players. Sentinels, I feel like it's going to be close, probably a 3-map series again, but I feel like Sentinels actually will take this and knock FaZe down to low bracket.
Sam?
If you'd asked me this 2 weeks ago, I would have said FaZe.
Oh,
But
that's actually interesting. I would have thought 2 weeks ago you'd be more in favor of Sentinels, but okay. Explain.
Well, no, just purely because of how FaZe played over the last 2 weeks. They've just been so freaking good. But after seeing Sentinels with tens, the level up because I've been like every episode we have, I'm like, at what point do we say, okay, Sentinels, what the hell are you doing? Because they've been so up and down and all over the place. I've been, as much as I love Sentinels and I have wanted to see them succeed, I've been one of their biggest criticizers. But now with tens, they look so hot. They are looking so good. And I'm not sure if the Smeag can overcome this one. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I think Frodo wins in this movie. Does that work? Can we?
Yeah, Frodo does eventually kill. Spoilers for the Lord of the Rings. Frodo does wind up sort of chucking Smeagol into the volcano. Kind of Smeagol does it to himself. You know, Smeagol call him. It's all duality of man or hobbit creature thing. But suffice it to say, I am going to leave with both of you. I think Sentinels edge this one out, but I think it's going to be a hell of a series. I think it could go either way, and I think it's going to be fun to watch. So be sure to tune in when that happens. Yeah. Now let's hit some quick EU predictions. Same thing. We're going to do it this way. All right. Matchups. We got Heretics versus NIP. Who's taking it? Why? Sentence. Give it to me. Joe, start.
Heretics still haven't. The Heretics were good at first strike. They haven't shown that much variation in their play style. I think this is going to go to NIP, who have changed up so much.
Sam?
I can agree with that. I think Heretics had a fantastic showing in first strike, and then we had the kind of challenges leading up, and they didn't look as... I mean, it felt like they kind of cooled off a little. And completely contrary, Ninjas in Pajamas have looked the best that they have looked in months, maybe like half a year. Like, they are looking really, really solid. So I see them taking this one as well.
All right, we're going to head down to the lower bracket. So the loser of that, if we're assuming that Heretics move down, we'll be playing against Ace. Do we think Heretics just cruises through that one? Do we think Ace puts up a fight?
Oh, yeah.
How are we feeling about that one? Sam, you just hit me with the dismissive. Oh, yeah. Explain.
I see Heretics taking that one at the very least. Yes, Ace has quietly been a good team, kind of on the up and up, more or less, but I think that Heretics still edge it out. They haven't changed too much, and yes, they've kind of cooled off a little bit, but it's like, if Heretics is here and Ace is here, and Heretics is cooled off to here, you know, there's still all of this. So, I see Heretics taking that one.
All right, do you agree with that, Joe, or do you think Ascent can do something here?
I think Heretics take it, but I think it's going to be close. I'm looking at the Blister match, right, and I'm looking at how Heretics kind of didn't deal well with the sort of pace that Blister was playing at, and I kind of see Ascend could challenge in the same way, right? Remember that Ascend destroyed Ballista nearly came quite close with Heretics. I think Heretics will ultimately take it, but it's a real match, right? Let's put it that way.
It is. Now into Group B, we've got FPX versus Defuse team. I think we've kind of already spoken about a lot of our views on this one. I know Joe's gotten into it a little bit, so Joe, hit me with your prediction here.
FPX 2-0.
Yeah.
Defuse aren't bad, but I think FPX is the best team in Europe right now, and you never know. They can always be shaken on the map, but I cannot see it. It's very, very hard for them to actually lose to Defuse.
Sam, you agree?
100%.
I think
FPX best team right now. Yeah.
we all agree on that one. That one's probably one of the more straightforward matchups. So that'll presumably match up Defuse team against Guild. Now, as our #1 Guild fan, do you think they're going to take that, Sam?
I don't know. You know what? Yes. I think Guild win that one. I'm going to continue flying my Guild flag. Please don't let me down, boys.
There you go. Joe, you agree?
Yeah, I think Guild are going to take it. I mean, it's the improvements they've been making recently. I just don't think Defuse match up too well against them. So yeah, Guild.
All right, now I'm going to ask for one more spicy prediction here because it's not as easy to see through this bracket since it's going to be groups and then they'll go into a playoff bracket. So we're not going to get to talk about that before those matchups come through. So just give me your hot take. Who's winning EU Masters? Joe, hit it.
FPX.
All right, Sam?
What he said. FPX.
I'm going to go NIP. We'll see. We'll see. I think that FPX is the safe money, but who's ever had fun gambling on the safe money, right? That's no fun. Nothing doing there. All right. So we're gonna slide on. The other thing that's coming up this weekend, the Game Changers qualifiers are happening. That's why you're seeing all of these announcements that we talked about earlier on this show. That's gonna be super cool. There won't be a broadcast because it would compete against Masters, but we'll all keep an eye on it to see who makes it into the big event. One last thing that we want to talk about here. We had a little bit of a neural theft. We are tight on time, so we're just going to show it, give some hot takes, and then we're going to dip out. Slasher put out his regional power rankings based on what he's seen from the Masters so far. That is his regions that he thinks will be best when we come to international competition in Iceland. What is that, next month? Next month already? End of April, right? That's when that is actually happening.
Yo, that's crazy.
It's very soon. It's very soon that's supposed to be happening in Iceland for Masters.
Players, update your passports.
Yeah, right. Make sure you got visas, permissions, everything that you need. Please don't miss your opportunity because of that. But here we have the power rankings. He's got EU on top, Brazil second, NA coming in third, then Korea, Japan, LATAM, and Southeast Asia, which is also the Oceania region, as you can tell from the flags that he's chosen. How do we feel about this ranking, Sam?
I am so happy that he put EU on top. The Brazil one is interesting to me mostly because I don't actually watch the region too much, but of course I see talk about Brazil and in various other esports as well. There's always this kind of wild card region that have some good teams, but most of the time don't quite seem to stack up to EU and NA. So I'm not surprised to see him place them so high up, but I am surprised to see him place them above NA. And I think he said in a response somewhere lower down in there, but it was something along the lines of NA players are really good, but they lack the depth. And I think that's something that Strong was saying a little bit earlier as well. Like, they have these good players, but there's no direction, there's no forethought, there's no counter-stratting, there's no real planning involved in it. So, yeah, I mean, EU number one.
Strong?
Yeah, I mean, I generally would. EU's definitely number one, I think, right now. I think, and NA, I think he says like NA couldn't even go below top three, which I could see, but to be honest, I think the skill level in NA is high enough that they probably will still be competitive. Obviously, Brazil, I haven't watched enough of it. I do come from a background in Brazilian esports to some extent. I have coached there a few times, so I kind of do know the region. I think it's a lot of the analysts and a lot of the commentators are overrating Brazil a little bit because you're not really. From what I've seen, the raw mechanical ability in the region is not the best right now. They're not doing anything particular. They're playing very fast. They're playing very fast Valorant for the most part. It's not. It's different to NA with regards to its like team executes and stuff like that, rather than just what I can do on an individual outplay. So I guess maybe they are above NA and they are above Korea. But I think more likely it's probably going to be Korea second, which Korea is weird because of the talent. You never know what the talent pool's like with Korea. But I think people have kind of gone from being like, oh, at the start of the game, oh, Korea's going to dominate everything, blah, 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 to at this point, they're kind of underrating them. But yeah, I mean, I think he's He's broadly in the money there. The one thing I should point out here is that Oceania is not in the Southeast Asian region, so he's kind of made a mistake there. It's in the North. It's part of North America. So, but yeah, apart from that,
life is confusing in that regard. But
Yeah.
look, I'm gonna fly the NA flag here. I think they're gonna surprise when we get to international competition, and I think that one of the most interesting things is just how limiting the slot availability in that first Masters is going to
Yeah.
be. We're gonna have 2 teams from EU, 2 teams from Brazil, 2 teams from NA. It's gonna be the best of the absolute best, and I feel pretty good about our best of the best in NA. I feel pretty dang good about it. I think that if you know you're looking at the top 4 expected teams, if you're getting 2 of those teams, I think they're going to be able to take it against EU competition. I think it's going to be really interesting and really telling to see, especially when you see teams like Ballista that have made that more aggressive playstyle work in EU because they catch off expectations. Your set strats are only going to work so much if you get punched in the mouth. Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. That is the NA playstyle here. That's the Brazilian playstyle as well. I think it's going to be interesting. I think fireworks are going to fly. I'm really excited to get to international competition. We do still have this first run of Masters to conclude. We're going to find out what's going on there. We're going to find out what's going to happen this week. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. We are way over our time, as per usual. If you enjoyed this show, please follow this channel. Follow us here on Twitch. Please follow our guest. You can see his @ right below his face, right there, @ Joe J. Edwards. He coaches Honk. He is a very smart guy when it comes to the Valorante. He is worth a follow if you're interested in Valorant. Please do so. We'll see you all next week. Same time, same place. Bye-bye now.
all right.
Bye.